Malcolm J. Ellington, a billionaire known across Atlanta for his philanthropic ventures and business acumen, walks slowly along the narrow gravel paths. Every Sunday, for the past 5 years, he came here to visit his son, Isaiah's grave. Even now, the weight of grief pressed on his shoulders as heavily as it had the day he first held the news of Isaiah's passing. Time had not dulled the ache. In fact, the mornings felt sharper now, when the air was crisp and the world seemed to move forward while his heart remained tethered to a single, unbearable memory. Malcolm paused in front of the simple marble headstone, engraved with Isaiah's name in the words, "Kindness changes the world." He placed a hand gently on the cold stone, closing his eyes for a long moment. Memories flooded back. Isaiah's laughter, the way he had helped friends without expecting praise, the evenings they had spent in quiet conversation about life, courage, and integrity. Malcolm's chest tightened as he whispered, "I hope you know how much you're missed, son. Every day we live because of the love you showed." The cemetery was quiet, the soft rustle of leaves in the early wind, the only sound besides Malcolm's steady footsteps. But then, in the distance, something caught his eye. Two small figures, almost hidden among the taller gravestones, knelt with their heads bowed. Malcolm's brow furrowed as he watched them. They were young, no older than 6 or 7, their heads close together, hands clasped tightly in prayer. He could hear the faint whispers carried by the wind, though the words were muffled. Something about the earnestness, the intensity of their devotion, drew him in immediately. As he approached, Malcolm realized they were twins, their small forms identical yet distinct in their demeanor. One bold and confident, the other gentle, almost shy. They didn't seem to notice him at all, their attention entirely fixed on the grave before them. The twins' voices, soft but resolute, finally reached his ears. "Thank you for saving Mommy. We will pray for Isaiah forever." Malcolm's heart skipped a beat. He froze, stunned. These children, strangers to him, spoke as if they knew Isaiah personally. As he looked more closely, he realized the depth of their sincerity. It was not a casual visit, nor a childish game. These girls were praying, fully aware of some connection to his son, some unseen thread that linked them to Isaiah's life. Malcolm stepped closer, his shoes crunching on the gravel, yet he felt almost afraid to interrupt them. There was something sacred in the way they knelt, their small hands pressing together, heads bowed. He could sense the weight of their gratitude, the raw honesty in their words, and it pierced him with a mix of sorrow and awe. He wanted to ask how they knew Isaiah, how they could feel such deep reverence for someone they had never met, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he simply observed, letting the moment unfold. Finally, one of the twins, her voice soft but unwavering, spoke again. "He helped Mommy when she had no one. He gave her hope." Malcolm's eyes widened. Hope. That single word resonated with him more profoundly than anything else he had heard in years. Isaiah had always believed that even the smallest act of kindness could create a ripple, and here it was, manifest in these two tiny figures. His son's influence, unintentional yet undeniable, had reached across families and years, touching lives in ways Malcolm had never imagined. He swallowed hard, the emotion nearly overwhelming him, and finally stepped forward gently. "Hello, little ones," he said, his voice soft but steady, carrying warmth and authority all at once. The twins looked up, their eyes wide, scanning his tall frame. There was no fear, only cautious curiosity. "I'm Malcolm Ellington," he continued, kneeling slightly to meet their gaze. I think you might know someone very special to me." Their expressions shifted, a mixture of recognition and hope, though they remained silent. Malcolm noticed a small, worn photograph clutched in the hands of the bolder twin. It showed Isaiah sitting on a bus bench, night falling around him, a weary young mother beside him, and something about the image confirmed what the girls had whispered. Isaiah had helped this woman, this mother of the twins, on that night long ago. A simple, selfless act of kindness that now revealed its full impact. Malcolm's heart swelled with a mix of pride and sorrow. He wanted to kneel beside them, to thank them for keeping Isaiah's memory alive in their prayers, and to understand the story that had brought them here. He paused, taking a breath, and said, "Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Everyone watching this story, before we continue, type in the comments where you're watching from. Your voices matter, and we'd love to hear you." He smiled, the tension in his chest easing just slightly, though the ache remained. Even as viewers engaged with the story, Malcolm knew that the true journey was only beginning. The path to uncovering how Isaiah had saved this family, why these twins prayed so devotedly, and how one act of courage could shape so many lives. Malcolm looked back at the twins, his heart a mix of determination and wonder. He would learn their story, he would understand their connection to Isaiah, and he would make sure that the boy's kindness, an act so small, so simple yet infinitely powerful, would be honored, remembered, and preserved. The cemetery, bathed in early sunlight, was no longer just a place of mourning. It was now a place of revelation, of connection, and the start of a story that would change everything. The twins' whispered prayers had barely faded when Malcolm realized he needed to know more. Their words, so simple, so innocent, held a depth that demanded understanding. He crouched slightly, his tall frame imposing yet gentle, and spoke softly, careful not to startle them. "I'm Malcolm Ellington. I think you're talking about someone very dear to me. My son Isaiah. Can you tell me what you mean when you say he saved your mother?" The bolder twin, Amara, looked into his eyes with a seriousness far beyond her years. Her small hands, clasped together as if holding the memory of that night, trembled slightly. "He did," she said, her voice steady. "Isaiah. He helped Mommy when no one else would. We prayed for him at the grave because he made her safe." Malcolm's heart ached as he absorbed her words. These children, strangers to him, were living proof that Isaiah's compassion had not only saved a life, but had been remembered, honored, and carried forward in prayer. The quieter twin, Naya, nestled closer to her sister, adding softly, "Even though we never met him, we miss him, and we thank him every day. He gave Mommy hope." A sudden wave of emotion hit Malcolm so hard he almost had to sit down. The sunlight that filtered through the tall oak trees seemed to flicker against the marble headstones, echoing the flicker of hope he now saw mirrored in the eyes of these children. He realized that Isaiah's influence was not contained in his brief life. It had extended, in quiet, unseen ways, to touch a family he had never met. Malcolm wanted to know everything, every detail, every moment that Isaiah had been present for Lena Carter, the mother of these twins. He noticed the worn photograph clutched tightly in Amara's small hand. The edges were frayed, the colors faded, yet the image of Isaiah sitting beside a weary, frightened young woman at a bus stop was unmistakable. Malcolm felt a lump in his throat. This was the proof he had hoped to find but could never have expected. The connection, the tangible evidence of his son's goodness reaching beyond his imagination. "May I see that photograph?" Malcolm asked carefully, extending a hand. Amara handed it to him, her small fingers brushing against his. The photo confirmed every detail he had feared and hoped for. Isaiah, calm and comforting, offering reassurance and attention to a woman who had clearly been in distress. The image spoke louder than words ever could. Malcolm's mind raced. How had Isaiah known what to do? How had he found this woman and helped her without hesitation, without seeking recognition? The twins watched him closely, sensing his deepening emotions. Malcolm felt a mixture of gratitude, sorrow, and determination. This moment was more than a reunion with a memory. It was a revelation. Isaiah's kindness had set into motion something Malcolm had never anticipated, something that now required action. He needed to find Lena Carter, to understand the full story of what had happened on that rainy night, to ensure that the act of bravery, compassion, and empathy Isaiah had shown was fully honored and preserved. Malcolm's thoughts raced as he considered the next steps. He needed assistance, someone trustworthy, someone who could navigate the delicate process of locating Lena Carter without alarming or overwhelming her. His mind immediately went to Marcus Webb, his head of private investigations, a man with decades of experience handling sensitive cases with discretion and precision. Marcus had helped Malcolm navigate crises before, and he would be the ideal person to find Lena and ensure her safety while confirming the details of Isaiah's actions. As Malcolm prepared to make the call, the twins remained silent, their small hands still pressed together in prayer. He could see the unwavering faith in their eyes, the deep respect for a life they had never known fully, but had honored with every ounce of their innocence. Their trust, their belief in the goodness of a stranger who had saved their mother, carried a weight that was almost spiritual. It reminded Malcolm why Isaiah had always insisted that one act of kindness could change the world. He now had living proof. Taking a deep breath, Malcolm pulled out his phone, the early morning light reflecting softly off its polished surface. "Marcus," he said as soon as the line connected, "I need your help with something urgent. I believe Isaiah's act of kindness reached someone in need, and I want to make sure we understand everything that happened. It involves a woman named Lena Carter, and she may be living on Clearwater Street. She has twins, young girls no older than 7, and I think they've been praying for Isaiah." Marcus's voice, calm and methodical, came through immediately. "Understood, Malcolm. I'll start tracing the details immediately. Tell me everything you know. Any addresses, bus routes, times, anything that can help me locate her quickly and safely." Malcolm recounted the details he had gleaned from the twins, describing the photograph, the bus stop, the night of the storm, and Isaiah's actions. Marcus listened carefully, asking precise questions, taking notes with the discipline of a seasoned investigator. Once the call ended, Malcolm returned his attention to the twins. "You've done something extraordinary," he said softly, kneeling to be at their level. "You've helped me understand the impact of Isaiah's kindness, and now we're going to make sure it reaches the people he saved and protected." The twins exchanged a glance, a mixture of pride and solemn understanding. Even at their age, they seemed to grasp the enormity of what they had shared. As Malcolm stood and looked down the cemetery path, he realized this was only the beginning. Isaiah's simple, selfless act had created a ripple effect, touching not only Lena Carter and her daughters, but also countless lives that were yet to intersect with his story. The sun had climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the headstones, and Malcolm felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was not just about grief, it was about action, about preserving the legacy of courage, kindness, and empathy that Isaiah had left behind. And somewhere deep in his heart, he knew that finding Lena, meeting her, and understanding the full scope of Isaiah's heroism would be one of the most profound experiences of his life. These twins, with their unwavering prayers and innocent devotion, had opened a door that Malcolm had not realized existed. A door into a world where one young man's kindness had changed everything. Malcolm took a deep breath and stepped closer to the twins, letting his presence be calm and reassuring. Amara and Naya looked up at him with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if sensing that this tall, solemn man might hold answers they were not yet ready to understand. "I want to know everything," Malcolm said gently, crouching so that his eyes met theirs. "Can you tell me more about Isaiah and how he helped your mother?" Amara's small face lit up with determination. "His name is Isaiah," she began, her voice strong despite the slight tremor in her hands. "He helped Mommy when she had nowhere to go. Mommy was tired and scared, and Isaiah, he didn't just see her, he helped her. He stayed with her and made sure she would be safe." Nia nodded, her tiny curls bouncing as she clutched Amara's hand. "We never met him, but we know he was kind. We prayed for him because he saved Mommy. Every night we say thank you, and we tell him we miss him, even though he never met us." Malcolm's throat tightened. The innocence of their words, the unwavering faith in their prayers struck him deeply. He thought of Isaiah, his son, the young man who had always acted from the heart, without expecting anything in return. And now, through the words of these two little girls, Malcolm could see the ripple effect of that compassion stretching farther than he had ever imagined. "I understand," Malcolm said softly. "I want to meet your mother. I need to understand the full story of what happened that night." Amara reached into the pocket of her small coat and pulled out a photograph, carefully worn around the edges. "This is him," she said, handing the photo to Malcolm. "This is Isaiah with Mommy. He made sure she was safe." Malcolm took the photograph and studied it closely. The image was intimate and revealing. Isaiah sitting on a cold bus bench, gently offering comfort to a young woman who looked exhausted and terrified. The soft glow of the streetlights cast a halo around them, and the rain streaked the pavement, adding a quiet drama to the moment. Malcolm could see the care in Isaiah's posture, the patience in his eyes, and the gentle way he had extended himself to someone in need. This single photograph told a story of courage, empathy, and selflessness that transcended words. "These are remarkable children," Malcolm murmured, turning the photograph over carefully in his hands. "They have honored Isaiah's memory in a way that is truly extraordinary." Amara and Nia watched him with solemn faces, as if they could sense the weight of the discovery. "I promise you," Malcolm said, "I will find your mother and make sure we understand everything Isaiah did that night. His kindness will not go unnoticed or forgotten." Amara and Nia nodded, their small hands still clasped together. "We want Mommy to know," Amara whispered. "We want her to understand Isaiah's heart." Nia added softly, "And we want her to know that we never forget him. We will pray for him forever." Malcolm smiled beneath the growing pressure of emotion. These children, with their unwavering faith, had already begun a chain reaction of hope. Their prayers, their devotion, and their insistence on remembering Isaiah's kindness had set in motion a journey that would reveal truths long buried and bring justice to those who had been overlooked. He straightened and looked around the quiet cemetery, the air still damp from the morning rain. The wind rustled gently through the leaves, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and flowers. Malcolm felt the weight of the moment, the connection between the living and the departed, between innocence and experience, and between one act of kindness and the countless lives it could touch. Pulling out his phone, Malcolm dialed Marcus Webb, his private investigator. "Marcus," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "I have the names, the details, and even a photograph. The woman Isaiah helped is Lena Carter, and she lives somewhere near Clearwater Street. She has twin daughters, Amara and Nia. I need you to find her and make sure she's safe, and I need to understand the full story of what Isaiah did for her." Marcus's response was immediate and professional. "Understood, Malcolm. I'll start tracing her location immediately. Please send me the photograph and any other details you have. I'll ensure discretion and safety while confirming the events of that night." After ending the call, Malcolm turned back to the twins. "I promise you we will find Mommy," he said, "and we will make sure Isaiah's bravery and kindness are recognized, understood, and honored. You've already done so much by telling me what you know." The twins' eyes glistened with quiet hope. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The soft rustling of the leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the faint cries of birds all blending into a serene backdrop for the weighty mission at hand. Malcolm felt the presence of Isaiah everywhere, the soft curve of his smile, the thoughtful tilt of his head, the way he had always acted to protect and support others without hesitation. "We'll come with you," Nia whispered. "We can help tell the story. We can tell Mommy about Isaiah's heart." Amara nodded in agreement, and Malcolm felt a surge of gratitude. These children, despite their age, understood the profound truth of compassion, that one act of kindness could ripple through time, touch lives unseen, and create a legacy that even death could not erase. Malcolm rose, a renewed sense of purpose settling over him. The journey to find Lena Carter and uncover the full extent of Isaiah's heroism had begun. The photograph in his hands was more than just an image. It was a key to understanding, a symbol of the extraordinary impact one person could have, and a reminder that even the smallest acts of courage could echo across time and space. He looked down at the twins once more. "Thank you," he said softly, "for helping me see Isaiah's heart. You've given me a gift far greater than words can express. I will honor it." Amar and Nia smiled faintly. The innocence of childhood mingled with the solemnity of their purpose. As they returned to their prayers, their voices mingling in soft, unwavering devotion, Malcolm felt the quiet, powerful current of change beginning to flow. Isaiah's legacy, carried by two small girls with hearts full of faith, was about to unfold in ways that would touch lives far beyond anyone's imagining. Malcolm made his way through the quiet streets of Clearwater, the early morning light casting long shadows across the pavement. The city seemed to hold its breath, as if sensing the importance of the journey he was about to undertake. His motorcycle, polished and humming softly beneath him, felt like an extension of his own determination. Steady, disciplined, and unyielding. Each turn, each subtle vibration of the road beneath the tires, reminded him that every detail mattered. Every movement brought him closer to understanding the truth behind Isaiah's courageous act. The apartment building on Clearwater Street appeared modest from the outside, its brick facade aged but dignified. Malcolm dismounted and adjusted his jacket, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The faint scent of rain lingered from the previous evening, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked bread from a neighbor's window. As he approached the door, his mind rehearsed the words he would say, the respect he needed to show, and the patience required when speaking to someone who had endured hardship and fear. He rang the doorbell, the chime echoing softly through the hallway. A moment later, the door opened to reveal Lena Carter. She was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with an air of quiet resilience. Her eyes, tired yet alert, assessed Malcolm carefully. There was a hint of hesitation, the natural instinct of someone who had faced challenges alone for far too long. "Good morning," Malcolm said gently, his voice warm but steady. "My name is Malcolm Halstead. I'm here because I believe we may share a connection through someone very special. Isaiah." Lena's brow furrowed slightly. "Isaiah? Who? What do you mean?" Her voice carried the weight of uncertainty, a mix of curiosity and caution. Malcolm handed her the photograph of Isaiah sitting on the bus bench with her, worn at the edges and slightly damp from the girl's careful handling. Lena's hands trembled as she took the photograph, her eyes widening as recognition flooded through her. "Oh, my God," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. That's him. That's the night. The night Isaiah helped me." Malcolm nodded, allowing her a moment to absorb the memory, to relive the fear, the exhaustion, and the unexpected kindness that had changed the course of her life. "I've been speaking with your daughters, Amara and Nia," he continued softly. "They told me how Isaiah helped you, how he made sure you were safe, and how he inspired them even without meeting them. I needed to hear your side of the story, to understand everything that happened that night." Lena led him inside, the apartment modest but warm, filled with small touches that reflected a life carefully maintained despite hardship. The scent of brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of laundry and home-cooked meals, creating a comforting atmosphere that softened the intensity of the conversation to come. Sitting at the small kitchen table, Lena took a steadying breath. That night, it was terrifying. I was pregnant, alone, and had nowhere to go. I didn't know how I would survive the storm, how I would protect myself and my unborn child. And then Isaiah appeared. He didn't hesitate. He gave me a sandwich, water, and his phone to call the shelter. He stayed with me until the van arrived, making sure I was safe before disappearing into the rain. I never even got his full name, just that he lived nearby. Malcolm listened intently, his mind painting the scene vividly. The cold rain streaking down the streets, the dim light of the bus stop flickering, the way Isaiah had offered himself without expectation, driven only by compassion. The image of a young man risking discomfort, standing in solidarity with a stranger in need, resonated deeply. "And later," Lena continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I found out that Isaiah had died that night in an accident. I couldn't believe it. The person who saved me, gone. But seeing this photograph, realizing that my daughters remembered him, prayed for him, and honored his kindness, it's overwhelming." Malcolm felt a lump in his throat. The quiet courage of Isaiah, the faith of Amara and Nia, and the enduring resilience of Lena created a tapestry of hope and bravery that seemed almost sacred. "Your story," Malcolm said gently, "it's more than just a memory. It's a testament to what one act of kindness can create. Your courage, Isaiah's bravery, and your daughter's devotion, it all connects. It ripples through lives in ways we can't yet measure." Lena nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I want to make sure Isaiah's act isn't forgotten. I want my daughters to know that kindness matters, even when the world seems harsh, even when it seems like no one is watching." Malcolm reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. And that's why I'm here. We will honor Isaiah's memory. We will make sure his bravery is remembered, celebrated, and carried forward. Your story, his actions, and your daughter's prayers, they will become a living legacy. You will not face this alone. The morning sun streamed softly through the window, illuminating the dust motes floating gently in the air. The city outside seemed to hold its breath, quiet and expectant, as if recognizing the significance of the moment unfolding within this small apartment. Malcolm could see the weight lifting slightly from Lena's shoulders, replaced by a mixture of relief, hope, and a profound sense of purpose. I'll make sure we document everything, Malcolm said, not just for memory, but so that Isaiah's courage can inspire others. There are people who need to know that one person's heart, one act of bravery, can change lives forever. Lena smiled faintly, wiping a tear from her cheek. Thank you for coming, for listening, and for caring. I never thought anyone would see this story, but now maybe it can mean something more. Maybe it can help others. Malcolm nodded, feeling a quiet resolve settle in his chest. He knew that this meeting was only the beginning, an essential step toward understanding, justice, and honoring the extraordinary act of a young man whose kindness had touched so many lives. As he prepared to leave, he glanced once more at the photograph, committing every detail to memory. The warmth in Isaiah's eyes, the careful way he had offered comfort, and the enduring impact of a single moment of courage. Outside, the city continued its morning rhythm, oblivious to the quiet revelations taking place in Lena's apartment. But for Malcolm, for Lena, and for the twins praying at a distant grave, the story of Isaiah's kindness was coming fully into focus, a story that would ripple far beyond their small corner of Clearwater Street, touching hearts, inspiring courage, and reminding the world that even in darkness, one person's light could shine endlessly. After leaving Lena's apartment, Malcolm felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing gently but insistently on his shoulders. The photograph, the twins' prayers, and Lena's testimony had given him clarity, but there was still work to be done. The city streets of Clearwater stretched before him, quiet in the late morning light, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic and the soft whirring of his motorcycle's engine. Every vibration of the tires against the asphalt seemed to echo the rhythm of his own heartbeat, a steady, deliberate cadence that reminded him how vital each step of the investigation was. He dialed the number for Marcus Webb, his trusted head of private investigations. Marcus had been by his side through corporate crises, personal tragedies, and the shadowy corners of the business world. Now he was indispensable in uncovering the full story of Isaiah's final night, and more importantly, the people who had quietly influenced the events surrounding it. Marcus, Malcolm began, his voice calm but urgent, I've just met Lena Carter. She confirmed that photograph. She told me about the night Isaiah helped her. We need to locate her fully, verify every detail, and understand exactly what happened that evening. Marcus's voice was steady, professional, but carried an undertone of urgency. Understood, Malcolm. I've already started pulling records from the shelters, cross-referencing the bus route information, and verifying any calls or logs that might lead us to her. I'll make sure we leave no stone unturned. Do you have any specifics I should focus on? Malcolm ran a hand through his hair, looking out at the quiet streets, the city bathed in soft sunlight that reflected off puddles from the previous night's rain. She mentioned Clearwater Street, the number 9 bus route, and the women's shelter where Isaiah helped her. Those are our starting points. Anything else you can uncover about who may have been observing them that night will be crucial. The conversation was punctuated by the faint rumble of Malcolm's motorcycle idling, a subtle reminder of the discipline and mobility that defined him and his team. Got it, Marcus replied. I'll coordinate with local contacts, review CCTV footage near the bus stop, and check shelter intake logs. If anyone recorded or noticed unusual activity that night, we'll find them. Malcolm's mind drifted back to the image of Isaiah, sitting on that rain-soaked bench, offering comfort without hesitation to a terrified young woman. He thought of Amara and Nia, their small voices whispering prayers at a grave they had never physically visited, but felt intimately connected to. The innocence and faith of the twins struck him as more powerful than any legal document or corporate report. Their unwavering belief in goodness was a beacon guiding him through grief, anger, and the labyrinth of corporate intrigue that surrounded his family's business. Marcus, he continued, we also need to understand the chain of oversight. Who might have been watching Isaiah? Who could have tried to manipulate the situation for personal or corporate gain? Lena saw a dark SUV that night. That vehicle might hold answers. Marcus made a note in his system, his fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. I'll cross-reference vehicle registrations, rental logs, and any private security surveillance in that area. If someone was tracking them, we'll find out who and why. Nothing will remain hidden. Malcolm nodded, appreciating the meticulousness of Marcus's approach. It reminded him of the disciplined nature of his own life, of the motorcycles he rode with his closest friends, the brotherhood that had taught him the value of loyalty, vigilance, and honor. Each ride, each careful maneuver on the open road, mirrored the precision needed in this investigation. The streets, the city, and even the quiet of the early morning became a canvas where Malcolm could visualize every step, every connection, and every subtle movement that could reveal the truth. He ended the call with a sense of resolve. Marcus would find Lena, trace the dark SUV, and confirm the shelter records. The next steps would bring clarity, justice, and, he hoped, a measure of peace for Lena, the twins, and the memory of Isaiah. As he revved his motorcycle and merged back into the streets of Clearwater, Malcolm allowed himself a moment to reflect. The city had a rhythm all its own. The soft flutter of leaves, the distant murmur of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog. These small details reminded him that life continued, even in the shadow of tragedy. But the memory of that stormy night, of Isaiah's courage, and the unwavering faith of two little girls created a current beneath the surface, guiding him toward the answers he sought. He thought of the shelter van, the way Isaiah had stayed by Lena's side until safety arrived. He imagined the girls' prayers, whispered with innocence and faith, rising like threads of light that connected the living to the lost, the present to the past. This story, Malcolm realized, was about more than justice or investigation. It was about preserving the ripple effect of kindness, ensuring that acts of courage and compassion were acknowledged and carried forward. By the time he returned to his private office, sunlight had fully broken through the clouds, illuminating stacks of files, photographs, and evidence boards that Marcus had begun organizing. Each piece of information, no matter how small, contributed to the growing mosaic of truth. Malcolm took a moment to center himself, recalling the quiet determination of Isaiah, the prayers of Amara and Nia, and the resilience of Lena. Every detail mattered. Every person's actions were a part of a larger tapestry that demanded careful, thoughtful attention. Today, Malcolm thought to himself as he sipped his coffee, we uncover the truth, not just for business or closure, but for the memory of a young man who showed that kindness could change lives. And we do it with respect, with discipline, and with the same courage he showed on that rainy night. He glanced out the window, the city buzzing softly in the background, and felt a quiet sense of anticipation. The pieces were beginning to align, the story unfolding with clarity, and the work ahead, though challenging, was guided by an unshakable moral compass. And somewhere, miles away, Lena Carter and her daughters continued their morning routines, unaware that the wheels of justice and memory were turning toward them, prepared to honor the courage of a young man whose single act of compassion had set in motion events that would ripple far beyond Clearwater Street. Malcolm parked his motorcycle just a few blocks from Clearwater Street, the city streets bathed in the soft glow of the late morning sun. The air carried a faint scent of rain from the previous night, mixed with the aroma of fresh bread baking in nearby apartments. The combination of lingering storm moisture and warmth gave the city a gentle, reflective feel, as if the world itself paused to take a breath. He adjusted his leather jacket and ran a hand over the worn handlebars, feeling the familiar hum of his bike beneath him. A reminder that he moved through life with both purpose and presence. Lena Carter's apartment was modest but tidy, reflecting the quiet resilience of a woman who had endured hardship yet maintained her dignity. Malcolm knocked gently on the door, letting the sound echo softly in the hallway before Lena's cautious but welcoming voice called him inside. He stepped in, aware of the weight of this meeting. This was not just another investigation. It was an encounter with a life forever changed by Isaiah's kindness. A life connected to two small girls whose prayers had reached across time and space. "Mr. Halstead?" Lena said, her voice steady but carrying a hint of nervous anticipation. Her eyes, deep with both fatigue and warmth, studied him for a moment before she nodded. "I'm Lena. You wanted to speak with me?" Malcolm offered a calm, reassuring smile. "Yes, Lena. Thank you for welcoming me. I want to understand everything. Exactly what happened that night with Isaiah. I've seen the photograph, I've heard from the twins, and I need to hear your account in your own words." Lena gestured for him to sit at the small kitchen table. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, creating soft patterns on the worn wooden floor. The room smelled faintly of herbal tea and the faint remnants of breakfast, a cozy contrast to the story she was about to tell. Taking a deep breath, Lena began, her voice quiet but unwavering. "It was late, around 9 in the evening. I was pregnant, homeless, and terrified. I had been trying to get somewhere safe for hours, but every bus had passed. Every shelter seemed full. I remember standing by the bus stop, shivering, feeling like the world had forgotten me." Malcolm listened intently, each word painting a vivid picture of vulnerability and despair. He could almost see the rain-soaked streets, the glimmering puddles reflecting dim streetlights, and the shadow of the city pressing in from all sides. "And then he appeared," Lena continued, her eyes glistening as she recalled the memory. "Isaiah, he was sitting on the bench and he noticed me. I didn't even speak. I was too frightened. He just offered me a sandwich and some water. He didn't ask anything in return, didn't make a fuss. He just made sure I was safe." Malcolm felt a lump in his throat, imagining a young man with nothing but a small bag of possessions, taking time to care for a stranger. He pictured Isaiah's face in the dim streetlight, calm and determined, embodying a courage that extended beyond fear. "He asked me where I was going, and when I explained, he took out his phone and found the nearest women's shelter," Lena said, her voice steady despite the memory. "He waited with me until the van arrived. He didn't leave until he knew I would be safe. And then, he walked home in the storm. I later learned he died that night." Malcolm's fingers rested lightly on the table, the hum of his motorcycle and the distant city sounds creating a quiet rhythm that mirrored his focus. Every detail she shared reinforced the depth of Isaiah's compassion, the profound courage of a young man willing to act selflessly in a world that often rewarded indifference. "I wanted to help," Malcolm said gently, "and now I understand why. Isaiah didn't just provide a meal or directions. He gave you hope, safety, and dignity. That act changed your life, and the lives of your daughters Amara and Nia, who prayed for him even without meeting him. Their faith, it's remarkable." Lena nodded, a soft smile touching her lips. "They've never wavered. Every day they remember him. Every night they pray. I think, I think he saved more than me that night. He saved a part of them too. The belief that the world can be kind, even when it's dark." Malcolm paused, letting the words settle. The room infused with the quiet gravity of their shared understanding. The soft tapping of rain against the window from a lingering drizzle outside provided a gentle underscore, emphasizing the calm after the storm of that night. He reached into his jacket pocket and carefully placed the photograph on the table. "This image, it shows more than just a moment. It shows courage, empathy, and the potential of one person to make a difference. I need to ensure the story is honored, Lena. I need to make sure Isaiah's kindness doesn't end here." Lena glanced at the photograph, her eyes filling with a mixture of gratitude and reverence. "You're the first person who understands. Most people would see a boy and a stranger, but you see what he gave us: hope, dignity, and a path forward. Thank you." Malcolm nodded, feeling a surge of purpose. This meeting was not merely about confirming details. It was about connecting the threads of memory, courage, and faith, ensuring that the actions of a young man and the prayers of two small girls would ripple outward, touching countless lives. He stood, preparing to leave, but turned to Lena one last time. "I will follow every lead, uncover every truth, and make sure Isaiah's story is preserved. Your safety, your daughter's hope, and the integrity of what happened that night matter more than anything." Lena smiled softly, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifted slightly by his words. I trust you, Malcolm. And I know Isaiah's kindness will live on. As Malcolm stepped back onto the street, the city seemed to breathe around him. The gentle rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, the faint glimmer of sun on wet pavement. Each element was a reminder that life continued, but that within it, acts of courage and compassion could create ripples far beyond what anyone could see. And Malcolm knew, with quiet certainty, that he would honor Isaiah's legacy, guided by the faith and prayers of Amara and Nia, and the enduring gratitude of Lena Carter. The rain had tapered off to a soft drizzle as Malcolm and Lena continued their conversation. Outside, the city streets glistened, reflecting the pale light of early evening, while the scent of damp asphalt and wet leaves lingered in the air. The distant hum of motorcycles and the occasional murmur of pedestrians walking home created a rhythm that was both ordinary and comforting, a reminder that life moved forward even after tragedy. Lena paused for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. The warmth seeped into her hands, a small comfort amid the memories she was about to share. Her eyes, calm but deep with the weight of experience, met Malcolm's. I remember exactly what he said, she began, her voice quiet but steady. He told me that he lived about a mile from here. That night, when the van from the shelter arrived, he said he had to walk home in the storm. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't ask me to thank him. He just said goodbye and walked off into the rain. Malcolm listened intently, imagining the young man stepping into the dark, wet streets, the raindrops glistening against his hair and jacket, each step purposeful yet silent. There was a courage in that act, a willingness to face discomfort, risk, and the unknown simply because it was the right thing to do. He pictured Isaiah's silhouette, disappearing down a narrow alley as the storm whispered against the buildings, leaving behind only the faint imprint of decency and bravery. I didn't see him again, Lena continued, her voice carrying a mixture of sorrow and reverence. Later that night, I heard about the accident. I learned he had died, and it broke me in ways I couldn't explain. But even in that heartbreak, I remembered what he did for me, how he cared when no one else would, how he believed in hope and in people. Malcolm's gaze softened. He could feel the weight of her words, each syllable echoing the silent ripples that a single act of kindness could send into the world. He thought about Amara and Nia, the twin girls who had prayed so fervently for a boy they had never met, a boy who had changed their mother's life in ways they could scarcely comprehend. The innocence and faith of children, Malcolm realized, had a power that even the most jaded adults often overlooked. Did you ever tell anyone? He asked gently, careful not to rush the narrative, allowing the moments of memory to breathe. Lena shook her head. No, I couldn't. I wanted to protect the memory of what he gave me. I wanted it to stay pure, untouched by gossip or disbelief. And I needed to survive, to raise my children, knowing that someone had believed in goodness even when the world seemed cruel. Malcolm leaned back slightly, the warmth of the room mixing with the lingering chill from the drizzle outside. He could see Lena's resilience in the way she carried herself, the quiet strength of someone who had endured, survived, and yet remained open to the world's possibilities. It was a testament not only to her courage, but to Isaiah's influence, the seed of kindness he had planted that evening, now growing in the hearts of those he had touched. She sighed softly, glancing toward the window where the last drops of rain clung to the glass, refracting the fading light. That night, she said, her voice almost a whisper, I realized something important, that even when we feel alone, there are people in the world who will act with courage, who will show us that goodness exists. Isaiah, he reminded me of that. Malcolm nodded, absorbing the weight of her words. The motorcycle parked outside seemed almost symbolic now, a bridge between journeys, between the physical world and the emotional currents that ran deeper than any street or alley. Isaiah's story was no longer just about a single act. It had become a lifeline, a guiding light that would influence the lives of Lena, her daughters, and countless others who would hear this tale. And your daughters, Malcolm asked softly, do they know everything that happened? Lena smiled faintly, the corners of her eyes crinkling. They know the essentials. They know that a young man saved me, that he believed in kindness, They pray for him every day, Amara and Nia. And even though he never met them, they have a connection to him that I can't explain. It's like his spirit, his courage, lives on in their hearts. Malcolm felt a quiet swell of emotion. It was moments like this, the intersections of memory, faith, and action, that define the human story in ways no boardroom, no corporate ledger could measure. He reached for his notebook, jotting down details with precision, aware that every word Lena spoke was not merely testimony, but a bridge to the truth, a piece of a puzzle that, once assembled, would honor Isaiah's life and illuminate the ripple effect of a single, courageous act. As he prepared to leave, Malcolm rose slowly, giving Lena a respectful nod. Thank you, Lena. Your story, your honesty, it will guide every step I take to make sure Isaiah's kindness is remembered and that it continues to change lives. Lena's eyes glistened with gratitude, a silent acknowledgement that the legacy of goodness she had experienced firsthand would now be preserved, nurtured, and shared. I trust you, Malcolm, she said, and I know he would want this. He would want us to keep his kindness alive. Outside, the drizzle had ended entirely, leaving the streets polished and quiet under the fading light. Malcolm mounted his motorcycle, the engine humming like a heartbeat beneath him, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. Isaiah's story was far from over, and every detail Lena had shared added strength to the mission ahead. A mission to ensure that courage, empathy, and selflessness would ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could predict, yet in ways that mattered deeply. The afternoon sun had softened to a gentle amber glow, spilling warmth across the narrow streets as Malcolm and Lena lingered in the quiet of her small apartment. Outside, the city carried on with its steady rhythm. The distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, and the faint laughter of children returning from school. Yet inside, the room felt suspended in time, held together by memory, gratitude, and the delicate threads of connection that a single act of courage had spun. Nia, with the innocence only a 6-year-old could wield, stepped forward slowly, her small hands reaching for Malcolm's. "You'll take care of him, right?" she asked softly, her eyes wide and earnest. Her voice trembled slightly, carrying both fear and hope, a mixture that seemed to weigh heavier than her tiny frame could bear. Malcolm knelt to meet her gaze, taking her hands gently in his own. The touch was reassuring, firm yet tender, as if the energy of his conviction could seep into the child's very soul. "Yes, Nia," he said softly. "I will. Isaiah's story, his kindness, it will never be forgotten. We will honor him in everything we do." Amara, standing beside her twin, nodded solemnly, her curls catching the fading sunlight. She pressed her small palm to her chest, the gesture both instinctive and profoundly symbolic. "We pray for him every day," she said, her voice a whisper, "so he knows we remember." Malcolm's heart swelled with a mixture of awe and humility. These two young girls, connected to a boy they had never met, had woven a bond of faith and remembrance that transcended age, time, and circumstance. It was more than just gratitude. It was the purest form of acknowledgement, a recognition that goodness, once given freely, could echo far beyond the immediate moment. Lena smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl from Amara's forehead. "They've always believed in hope," she said softly. "Even when things seemed impossible, even when the world showed its harshest side, they've held on to the idea that someone, somewhere, can make a difference." Malcolm nodded, reflecting on the gravity of what he had witnessed. Isaiah had acted without expectation, without consideration for reward or recognition. Yet his actions had rippled outward, touching Lena's life, inspiring her daughters, and now compelling Malcolm to ensure that the truth of that night would be honored and shared. It was a lesson in courage, in empathy, and in the quiet power of human kindness. "I want you both to understand," Malcolm said, his voice measured, almost ceremonial, "that Isaiah didn't just save your mother. He changed lives that night. And your prayers, your love, your belief in his goodness, it's part of that change. You are helping him continue what he began." The girls exchanged glances, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Their small hands tightened around each other's, as if drawing strength from their shared promise. The air seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, the room filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of something far greater than any one of them, a legacy of selflessness and bravery, tangible even in its absence. Lena, her eyes glistening with unspilled tears, nodded toward Malcolm. "He would want you to know everything," she said. "Not just the part where he helped me, but how he did it, how he gave without hesitation, without asking for recognition. He made me believe in people again, in life again. And that is something I want my daughters to remember forever." Malcolm reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the worn photograph Amara had shown him earlier, the one depicting Isaiah on the bus bench, offering comfort and sustenance to a young, frightened woman. He held it up carefully, as if preserving the energy of that moment within its edges. "This photograph," he said, his tone reverent, "is more than just a picture. It's a testament. It shows what courage and kindness look like in action, and it reminds us that even in darkness, we can bring light." Nia's eyes filled with tears, and she stepped forward, wrapping her small arms around Malcolm's waist in a hug that carried both solace and determination. "We'll pray for him forever," she whispered, her voice muffled against his jacket, "and we'll tell everyone about him, so they know what he did." Amara pressed her forehead against Malcolm's arm, nodding. "We'll help people too, like he helped Mommy." Malcolm held them both gently, feeling the strength of their faith, their commitment, and their innocence. It was a profound reminder that the smallest hands, guided by love and belief, could carry the weight of legacy, and that the acts of a single person, no matter how fleeting, could inspire generations. As the evening deepened outside, the warm light of the apartment casting soft shadows across the wooden floors, Malcolm stood, slowly straightening. "Thank you, Lena," he said, his voice steady but infused with gratitude. "Thank you for trusting me with this story. And thank you, girls, for showing me how courage and kindness can ripple through lives in ways we can barely imagine." Lena smiled faintly, reaching out to squeeze Malcolm's hand. "It's our honor," she said softly. "And Isaiah, he would be proud to see that his actions continue to matter, even now." Malcolm turned his gaze to the fading light outside the window, imagining the rain-soaked streets, the quiet shelter van waiting for Lena that night, and the boy who had walked home through the storm without complaint. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to honor that memory, protect it, and ensure that Isaiah's story and the profound lesson of his courage would be preserved and celebrated. The moment lingered, a quiet intersection of past and future, grief and hope, sorrow and inspiration. And in that stillness, Malcolm made a silent vow. The ripples of Isaiah's kindness would reach far beyond what anyone could see, and the prayers of two small girls would guide every step of that journey. The late afternoon light filtered through the blinds of Lena's apartment, casting soft stripes across the worn wooden floor and the small table where Malcolm had spread out the photograph, notes, and the fragments of a story that seemed too extraordinary to be entirely true. The city outside hummed quietly, a muted soundtrack to a moment suspended in both grief and discovery. Nia and Amara sat cross-legged on the rug, their small hands clasped tightly together, their eyes fixed on Malcolm with a mixture of curiosity and solemnity, as if they could feel the weight of the responsibility he now carried. Malcolm leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, and ran a hand through his hair. He had spent years navigating the corridors of power, corporate intrigues, and the quiet desperation of those seeking justice. But nothing, he realized, had prepared him for this. A story born of compassion, of a single act of kindness that had spiraled into a chain of events far beyond anyone's imagination. He looked at Lena, who sat quietly beside the twins, her face a portrait of both exhaustion and relief, and felt the resolve harden within him. This story had to be told, and he had to uncover the truth for them. He held up the photograph once more, allowing the girls to examine it closely. "This isn't just any picture," he said, his voice calm but charged with purpose. "This shows Isaiah helping your mother, Lena, on the night when the rain was relentless, when no one else was there. He made sure you were safe, and now it's our job to understand how and why this moment happened." Amara's small hand reached out, brushing the edge of the photograph. "He didn't have to help us," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "He could have walked away." Malcolm nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate deep within him. "Exactly," he said gently. "And the fact that he didn't, well, that is what changes everything. That is why we must follow every lead, understand every detail, and ensure that his courage is recognized." Lena leaned forward, her eyes glistening as she spoke. "There was something strange that night," she admitted. "I remember seeing a dark SUV parked nearby while Isaiah was with me. I thought it was just someone passing by, but now I'm not so sure. I think someone was watching us." Malcolm's brow furrowed slightly, the investigative instincts kicking in. "Do you remember anything else?" he asked. "Any details about the vehicle? Or maybe a person who seemed out of place?" "Yes," Lena said, recalling the memory with surprising clarity. "It was a dark blue SUV, the kind that looks ordinary at first, but it stayed there longer than it should have. I didn't see the driver, but I remember feeling uneasy, like we were being observed." Malcolm made a note in his pad, the pieces of the puzzle beginning to align in his mind. He knew he had to act quickly. "I'm going to call someone who can help us trace this," he said, reaching for his phone. "Marcus Webb, the private investigator I trust implicitly. He will track down who was watching that night, and we will uncover the full story behind this photograph in your experience." He dialed Marcus's number with a calm precision, his voice steady as he outlined the situation. A young man, Isaiah, had performed an act of selfless kindness. A woman, Lena, had been helped that night while pregnant and homeless. And now evidence suggested that a third party had been observing the encounter, possibly with sinister intentions. Malcolm provided Marcus with the names, the bus route, Clearwater Street, and any details Lena could recall. Meanwhile, the girls listened attentively, their small faces reflecting awe and a growing sense of importance. Amara whispered to Nia, "It's like we're detectives now," and Nia nodded seriously, gripping her sister's hand. Their involvement, while innocent in its intent, symbolized the bridge between past kindness and future justice, a connection that Malcolm felt acutely as he prepared to uncover the truth. After the call, Malcolm leaned back, allowing the weight of the moment to settle. "Marcus is on it," he said softly. "He will find out who took the photograph, why someone was following Isaiah, and how everything connects. Lena, you and the girls have been incredibly brave. Your courage has guided this investigation, even though you might not realize it." Lena smiled faintly, her hands folded in her lap. "We just did what anyone would do," she said, though Malcolm knew it was more than that. It was faith, trust, and a belief in goodness that had led them to pray, to remember, and now to participate in revealing the truth. Nia leaned against her mother, whispering, "We'll keep praying for him, Mommy. He saved you." Amara added, "And we'll tell everyone what he did. Everyone should know." Malcolm felt a lump rise in his throat, an emotional blend of admiration and responsibility. This wasn't just about uncovering a story. It was about honoring a life, a decision, and a legacy that had impacted so many already. Every word the girls spoke, every gesture they made, reinforced the importance of the mission ahead. As evening approached, the apartment glowed with the warm hues of sunset, the city outside fading into twilight. Malcolm stood, gathering his notes and the photograph carefully. "We will find the answers," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "And Isaiah's story, his courage, his kindness, it will be remembered, protected, and shared." The girls nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of hope and determination. Lena reached out, touching Malcolm's arm gently. "Thank you for believing in him," she said softly, "and for helping us honor him." Malcolm took a deep breath, glancing once more at the photograph, the memory of that rainy night etched vividly in his mind. "This is just the beginning," he said. "And thanks to you, Lena, and to your daughters, every step we take will ensure that what Isaiah did that night will never be forgotten." Outside, the first stars began to appear, faint and distant, yet steadfast in their light, an apt reflection of the story unfolding inside that small apartment. The story of courage, observation, and unexpected kindness was ready to be revealed, and Malcolm knew the ripples of that night were only beginning to spread. The next morning, the sky hung low and gray, the remnants of rain glistening on the asphalt as Malcolm and Marcus navigated the winding roads of rural Tennessee. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, a quiet, contemplative aroma that seemed to suit the gravity of the task ahead. Marcus drove with the measured precision that years of private investigation had honed, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror as if expecting the world itself to shift beneath them. Malcolm, riding passenger, held the photograph of Isaiah and Lena close, the edges slightly frayed from repeated handling. Every crease told a story, every smudge a memory, and the sense of urgency pressed on him like the humid air against their skin. Their destination was unmarked on any conventional map, a small, weathered cabin tucked into the woods, accessible only by a narrow dirt lane lined with gnarled trees. Marcus had tracked Walter Briggs, the man who had answered the shelter call the night Isaiah had saved Lena. Briggs had disappeared the day after the incident, vanishing into the countryside under the alias Dale Warren. The cabin, when it appeared through the mist, was humble and solitary, almost as if it wished to remain hidden from the world. As they approached, Malcolm felt a tightening in his chest, a mix of anticipation and trepidation. He had spent hours reconstructing the night, connecting dots that most people would have dismissed as inconsequential. Yet every detail led here, to this quiet place in the Tennessee woods. He wondered what Briggs would reveal, how much of the story was known to him, and whether the man had wrestled with his conscience over the choices he had made. Marcus knocked on the door with a sharp, decisive rhythm. They waited in silence, the only sounds a distant rustle of leaves and a faint drip of water from the cabin's eaves. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a man in his early 50s, his dark eyes wide with a mixture of fear and recognition. Briggs had aged noticeably since the night he had observed Isaiah, the lines of guilt and indecision etched deeply into his face. "Mr. Briggs?" Malcolm began gently, stepping forward, holding the photograph up as a point of connection. "I need to speak with you about that night, about Isaiah and Lena Carter. Everything you witnessed matters. Your truth can help ensure what happened is understood correctly." Briggs's hand trembled slightly as he gestured for them to enter. The interior of the cabin was sparse, a worn couch, a small wooden table, and a single lamp casting a soft glow across the room. The air smelled faintly of old paper and pine, and for a moment, Malcolm allowed himself to feel the quiet weight of isolation that the man had lived under. Briggs began, his voice low and strained. "I didn't want to get involved. I was just following orders. I didn't think it would matter if I stepped back." He paused, swallowing hard. "But seeing Isaiah that night, helping her, protecting her, it changed something inside me. I realized I couldn't just watch anymore." Malcolm nodded, encouraging him to continue. "We need every detail, Mr. Briggs. What you observed, the calls you made, everything about the surveillance. The truth can protect Lena, honor Isaiah, and ensure that justice is done." Briggs's shoulders slumped as he sank into the couch, finally allowing the weight of confession to descend. "I made the call to the shelter," he admitted, his voice almost a whisper. "Isaiah's phone died, and I knew she needed help. I gave them my name and waited. And then," he trailed off, eyes glistening, recalling the memory of Isaiah's accident after being delayed by a delivery truck. The guilt of having witnessed the aftermath haunted him. Malcolm reached out, placing a steadying hand on Briggs's arm. "You did what you could," he said softly, "and now by telling the truth, you can help us understand the full story. It's not about blame anymore. It's about the impact of Isaiah's actions and ensuring no good deed goes unrecognized or misunderstood." Briggs nodded slowly, the tension in his body easing slightly. I'll write everything down," he said, voice firming with resolve. "The surveillance, the payments, the people involved. It's time someone knew the truth, not just about Isaiah, but about why he was being watched and by whom." Outside, the sky had begun to clear, sunlight breaking through the dissipating clouds and casting a warm glow across the cabin's worn exterior. Malcolm and Marcus both sensed the shift, not just in weather, but in the narrative itself. With Briggs finally speaking, The story that had begun with a single act of kindness was beginning to reveal the shadows of corporate intrigue that had lingered silently in the background. As they left the cabin, the air felt lighter, the world seemingly more aligned with justice. Malcolm held the photograph one last time before placing it carefully in his bag, aware that each step forward was a step toward understanding, toward truth, and toward honoring Isaiah's courage. The twins' prayers, Lena's gratitude, and the quiet bravery of a young man in the rain were threads weaving together a tapestry that now had the potential to illuminate not only the past, but the promise of hope for the future. Back in the sleek interior of his investigation office, Marcus Webb carefully laid out every scrap of information they had gathered from Briggs. The room smelled faintly of leather and coffee, a comforting familiarity amidst the chaos of unfolding revelations. He placed the photograph of Isaiah with Lena beside a notebook filled with meticulously recorded details, dates, times, descriptions, and observations, all of it painstakingly documented. Malcolm leaned over the table, reviewing the notes with a focused intensity, aware that each line could connect a crucial dot in the puzzle that had haunted them for months. Briggs sat quietly in the corner, his hands folded tightly in his lap. The weight of confession still pressed heavily upon him, but there was a visible shift in his posture, a subtle lightening in the lines of his face, as if relief had begun to seep through. He had spent the better part of the past 5 years in silent regret, complicit in actions he now recognized as morally wrong. And yet here he was, offering a chance at redemption, one act of honesty that might finally honor Isaiah's bravery. Marcus began speaking, his voice measured and precise. "Walter, what you provide here will not only confirm the sequence of events that night, but also reveal the extent of surveillance orchestrated against Isaiah. We need to understand who facilitated the payments, who authorized the tracking, and whether anyone else inside Holstead Logistics played a role." Briggs nodded, swallowing hard. "I'll write it all down," he said, his voice wavering at first but gaining strength with every word. "Every movement I observed, every call I made, every detail about the money, internal accounts, who sent it, who approved it. It's all in here." He reached for a pen, starting to scribe in neat, deliberate handwriting that belied the tremor in his hands. Each word seemed to release a fraction of the burden he had carried alone, and Malcolm watched with quiet satisfaction as the story he had witnessed finally took tangible form. Marcus, observing silently, reflected on the layers of complexity in this case. Isaiah's act of kindness, a simple gesture in the rain, offering food and comfort to a struggling young mother, had been observed, manipulated, and exploited for financial leverage by people who had no moral compass. Yet despite the web of corporate intrigue and deception, the purity of that moment remained intact. That simple human act had not been tainted. It had inspired truth, accountability, and courage in the hearts of those who now bore witness. As Briggs continued to write, Marcus moved to the office's secure computer system. He initiated a confidential internal audit of Holstead Logistics, inputting data, cross-referencing financial transactions, and preparing to uncover any anomalies or irregularities. The audit was methodical, precise, and exhaustive, designed to leave no stone unturned. Marcus understood that the evidence needed to be irrefutable, not only for the sake of justice, but to honor Isaiah's memory and protect Lena and the twins from any future repercussions. Malcolm watched as the first reports began to generate, highlighting suspicious transfers, unaccounted for withdrawals, and communication patterns that suggested a network of complicity. Every flagged item reinforced the notion that Isaiah's death had been targeted, not random, not tragic in isolation, but part of a larger calculated scheme. The revelation filled the room with a quiet tension, an understanding that the stakes were far higher than any of them had initially realized. Briggs paused for a moment, his pen hovering over the page. "I never thought I'd have to confront it all," he murmured, almost to himself. "I thought I could disappear and it would all go away. But seeing you, hearing the story fully, it makes me realize I can't run from it anymore." Marcus nodded without turning from the screen. "You don't have to run. You're helping to set things right. This isn't about punishment for you. It's about revealing the truth and preventing further harm. Every word you've written, every detail you've provided ensures Isaiah's act of courage is remembered for what it truly was. Outside, the afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting long, golden stripes across the office floor. The lights seemed to underscore the gravity of their work, illuminating the lines of determination etched on each face in the room. The quiet hum of the computer, the soft scratching of Briggs's pen, and the occasional rustle of papers created a rhythm that was almost meditative, a cadence of accountability and restoration. As the final details were transcribed, Marcus reviewed them once more, ensuring clarity and completeness. Every financial anomaly was noted, every interaction traced back to its source, every instruction documented. The audit had revealed its first critical insight. The trail of funds pointed to an internal actor within Holstead Logistics, someone who had deliberately facilitated the surveillance and manipulation. Briggs looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's. "I've told everything I know," he said quietly. "It's out there now. The truth is in writing, and if it's needed, I'll testify." Marcus allowed himself a brief nod of approval. "You've done more than anyone could have expected. Your honesty honors Isaiah in a way that nothing else can. Now we move forward carefully, step by step, ensuring that the foundation of evidence we've built is unshakable." Malcolm exhaled slowly, feeling a sense of closure in Briggs's cooperation. For the first time since tracing this story, the pieces were converging, and the path toward accountability was becoming tangible. Yet in the midst of procedural precision, both men knew that the human story, the courage, compassion, and unshakable kindness of a young man in the rain, remained the guiding force behind every action, every decision, and every step toward justice. And somewhere, in the quiet of the Tennessee woods, Briggs felt a flicker of hope, a sense that redemption was finally within reach. For the first time in years, he could believe that a single act of goodness, the one Isaiah had performed selflessly, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he had never imagined. After hours of reviewing records and cross-referencing every transaction, Marcus and Malcolm traced the suspicious funds to a dark thread, weaving through Holstead Logistics. Each entry, though carefully disguised, carried the fingerprints of internal facilitation. The complexity was staggering. Transfers routed through offshore accounts, subtle memo notes hidden in departmental spreadsheets, and timestamps deliberately misaligned. Yet the evidence converged on one undeniable conclusion. Someone from inside the company had enabled Meridian Partners to monitor Isaiah, setting the stage for manipulation that had tragically coincided with his final act of kindness. Briggs, who had been silent for much of the audit, leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I saw it that night," he said, eyes distant. "The SUV parked near the bus stop. I remember thinking, who could be tracking him? It didn't feel right. I thought maybe it was just corporate surveillance, routine stuff. But then I saw how deliberate it was. Every movement, every interaction, it was planned." Marcus nodded, allowing the moment of recollection to deepen. "That's why the photograph exists," he said. "It wasn't random. Someone was watching, someone with access and authority within Holstead Logistics. That person saw Isaiah's compassion unfold, and instead of recognizing its humanity, they turned it into leverage." Briggs shuddered at the memory. "I called the shelter myself," he admitted. "Isaiah's phone died, and the van hadn't arrived yet. I couldn't just leave her there. That night, for the first time, I made a choice, to help instead of follow instructions. And then, the accident. I was delayed by a delivery truck, and by the time I turned the corner," he trailed off, hands trembling. Marcus placed a steady hand on Briggs's shoulder. "You did what was right. You ensured she got help. That decision, small as it might have seemed, exemplifies exactly what Isaiah stood for. And now we have the proof that shows your conscience guided the right path, despite the pressures surrounding you." Malcolm leaned over the screen, highlighting the trail of financial activity and correlating it with key dates. Every suspicious payment, every internal transfer, all of it points to one insider. Whoever it is had both motive and access. They wanted leverage, and they found it through surveillance of Isaiah. "This isn't speculation. This is evidence." Briggs exhaled, a long, shaky breath, as if releasing a burden he had carried silently for years. I thought disappearing was enough, he said. I thought resigning and moving away would close the chapter. But now, seeing the truth laid bare, I know I have to confront it. I have to help you stop the damage done and protect those who Isaiah saved. Outside, the sun was beginning to lower in the Tennessee sky, casting long, amber streaks across the rural landscape. The shadows seemed to mirror the moral complexity of the case, a reminder that light and darkness often coexist, and that choosing the light, even in small ways, defines a life. Marcus noticed the quiet stillness of the evening, the distant hum of cicadas, and the subtle rustle of leaves. It felt as if the world itself held its breath, awaiting the unraveling of the truth. Marcus returned to the detailed ledger of transactions and internal memos. He highlighted key moments where authorization signatures aligned with the suspicious funds. We need to document everything clearly, he said. Every name, every date, every connection. When the time comes to present this to legal counsel, there can be no ambiguity. The integrity of this evidence is what will ultimately bring justice for Isaiah, Lena, and the girls. Briggs nodded, a faint glimmer of relief breaking through his previously tense demeanor. I'll testify, he said firmly. I'll explain every action, every hesitation, every decision. If it takes me standing in court, I'll do it. Isaiah deserves that. And Lena and the girls, they deserve the truth. Malcolm looked from Briggs to Marcus, understanding the delicate balance at play. We also need to confirm the SUV sighting, he added. If Briggs saw it, someone else was likely involved, an accomplice perhaps, or someone coordinating the surveillance from a distance. That piece completes the narrative, showing the orchestration behind Isaiah's final hours. Marcus agreed. We'll cross-reference eyewitness accounts, surveillance logs, and delivery schedules. Everything must align perfectly. The moment we connect all the dots, the internal actor will be revealed, and the chain of events that led to Isaiah's tragic death and his incredible act of heroism will be indisputable. Briggs is still seated, closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the gravity of the moment. It's strange, he murmured, how one boy in the rain, helping a stranger, could start a chain of consequences that reached so far. That night it was just him and her, and yet it set everything in motion. The exposure, the accountability, even my own redemption. Marcus leaned back in his chair, reflecting on the resilience and moral clarity of Isaiah. His courage wasn't loud, he said softly. It wasn't meant to be, but its ripple effect, that's what changes lives. And now, with your testimony in this audit, we're ensuring that ripple reaches everyone it was meant to touch. As evening deepened, the office lights cast a warm glow over the workspace. Papers were organized, digital records secured, and plans carefully outlined. The path ahead, contacting legal counsel, confirming the insider's identity, and preparing for testimony, was clear. But more than that, the human story remained at the center. A young man's selfless act, a mother saved, twin daughters praying, and a former agent seeking redemption. Every moment, every decision was anchored in that unshakable truth. Kindness, even in the smallest form, carries power far beyond immediate comprehension. Outside the office, the SUV Briggs had recalled remained only a memory, but its presence echoed through the narrative they were building. The convergence of evidence, witness accounts, and conscience-driven choices meant that justice could no longer be deferred. And for the first time, Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. Knowing they were on the verge of connecting the final dots that would bring accountability, honor Isaiah's memory, and protect those whose lives he had touched. The early morning air in rural Tennessee was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Marcus maneuvered his motorcycle carefully along the narrow winding road, the tires crunching over gravel. The sun had just begun to rise, scattering golden light over the rolling hills. He felt a mixture of anticipation and caution. Today they would confront the man who had lived in the shadows of guilt for years. Walter Briggs, now using the name Dale Warren, a man who had watched Isaiah's final act of kindness and had been forced to reckon with his own conscience. Briggs's small, modest home came into view. It was a wooden cabin, paint weathered by time, with a simple mailbox that barely leaned against the post. Marcus parked a respectful distance away, noting the subtle movement inside, the faint stirrings of someone aware of an approaching presence. Briggs appeared at the door, his shoulders tense, eyes wide with apprehension. The weight of the past seemed to hang over him like a storm cloud. "Mr. Warren," Marcus began, his tone firm but controlled, "I know this is unexpected. I am not here to accuse, but to understand, and more importantly, to ensure the truth is preserved." Briggs swallowed hard, his hands gripping the doorframe. "You, you found me," he said, voice cracking. "I thought leaving, disappearing, would close the chapter. I didn't think anyone would come looking." Marcus stepped closer, the gravel crunching softly under his boots. "The chapter cannot remain closed. Isaiah's actions, your observations, everything ties together. You know more than anyone about the surveillance, the intent behind it, and the consequences that followed. It is time to share it fully." Briggs exhaled slowly, looking down at the worn wooden floorboards. I, I watched him that night," he admitted, voice low. "I followed orders at first. Meridian Partners wanted to know his movements, to use him as leverage against Richard Halstead. They provided the funds, the vehicle, the schedule. I didn't question it, not until that night, until I saw him sit with her in the rain." Marcus nodded, letting Briggs continue, sensing the moral weight that had burdened him for years. "I saw the fear on her face," Briggs said, his hands trembling. "A young mother alone, terrified, and he gave her water, a sandwich, guidance. And then I realized I couldn't keep following orders. I called the shelter myself. I used my own name. I waited with her until the van arrived. And then I witnessed the accident." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus felt the raw gravity of the confession, the mixture of guilt, relief, and redemption intertwining in Briggs's tone. "You made the right choice," Marcus said softly. "You acted with integrity, even when it meant breaking from instructions. That choice ensured Lena and the girls survived that night. It was a moral act that mirrors Isaiah's own courage." Briggs looked up, eyes glistening. "I thought leaving was enough. I resigned the next day, changed my name, disappeared from the city. I never wanted to be part of it again. But now, the truth needs to be told. I need to help." Marcus handed him a folder, thick with documentation they had gathered over weeks. Surveillance logs, financial records, and corroborating witness statements. "We need you to detail every moment," Marcus said. "Every instruction you followed, every hesitation, every decision to diverge. The clarity of your account will be essential. Your testimony could protect families, honor Isaiah, and ensure accountability within Holstead Logistics and Meridian Partners." Briggs took the folder, eyes scanning the pages, the numbers, the emails, and the detailed timelines. He exhaled, a long and deliberate breath, the weight of years pressing down, then lifting slightly with the acknowledgement of responsibility. I will write it all down," he said finally. "Every detail. I will not omit a single moment." Outside, a gentle breeze moved through the pine trees, carrying the scent of earth and rain. Marcus could almost imagine Isaiah sitting on the bus bench, the night alive with possibility and quiet heroism. It was remarkable to think how one small act had created a chain of consequences stretching years into the future. The photograph of Isaiah and Lena, Briggs's confession, the funds traced to Meridian Partners, all threads of a tapestry that had started with courage and kindness. Marcus and Briggs moved to a small table by the window, sunlight spilling across the worn wood. They began organizing the evidence, making notes, and planning the chronology for legal presentation. Briggs's voice, at first tentative, grew stronger with each passing minute. The man who had once lived in fear of reprisal now began reclaiming his moral agency. "This isn't just about exposure," Marcus said. "It's about restoring truth. It's about showing that even in a world driven by greed and corporate maneuvering, conscience and courage still matter. Isaiah's choice, your choice, they are part of a moral thread that cannot be undone." Briggs nodded, a solemn understanding settling over him. "I understand," he said. "I see now that even when we think our actions are small, they can have far-reaching effects. That night, watching Isaiah, it changed me. It made me realize I have a duty to act rightly, no matter the cost. Marcus stood, extending a hand. Briggs took it, a gesture bridging years of guilt and years of hope. The road ahead would be challenging, coordinating with authorities, providing testimony, tracing internal corruption, but Marcus felt a deep reassurance. Isaiah's legacy, the twins' prayers, Lena's survival, all were converging toward a reckoning that justice demanded. As the sun rose higher, casting golden rays across the cabin, Marcus mounted his motorcycle once more. Briggs watched him go, clutching the folder that represented not just evidence, but redemption, responsibility, and the enduring impact of a boy's courageous heart. The wheels of accountability had begun to turn, and nothing would halt the journey toward truth. The air in the cabin felt heavier now, filled with the weight of revelations yet to be fully understood. Marcus and Briggs sat across from each other, the morning sun filtering through cracked blinds, dust motes dancing lazily in the light. Marcus unfolded the next part of the plan. "Briggs, we need to trace the origin of the surveillance funds," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "You said Meridian Partners provided the instructions, but someone inside Holstead Logistics financed it. That person is still unaccounted for." Briggs nodded, flipping through the thick folder of notes he had painstakingly compiled. "Yes, the money wasn't coming directly from Meridian. It was routed through internal accounts, small amounts but deliberate," he explained, pointing to the spreadsheet. "Someone wanted to hide the trail, make it look like it was clean. I remember seeing transfers approved in the corporate ledger, almost like a ghost moving the pieces behind the scenes." Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowing as he absorbed the significance. A trusted insider. Someone close to your father, close enough to know the operational accounts and confident enough to risk everything. His words carried a sharp edge, but also a quiet sadness. The realization that betrayal could come from within the inner circle was bitter, yet necessary for justice to move forward. Briggs exhaled slowly. "I have a hunch," he said, voice lowered. There was a name that kept appearing on approvals, always overshadowed by other executives. One man, a senior vice president, Victor Langford. He seemed reliable, devoted to the company, always offering help. I never questioned it then. I wish I had. Marcus's heart tightened. The picture was coming together. Meridian Partners, Holstead Logistics, and the moral choices of a boy who had simply acted with kindness. "We'll need documentation, proof of transfers, email correspondence, approvals. We must be meticulous. One wrong step, one incomplete detail, and they'll try to dismiss everything as coincidence." Briggs nodded, eyes shadowed by the weight of years. "I kept personal copies of some emails, invoices, and schedules. I can pull them together. I never intended anyone else to see them, but it's time." They worked in silence for several hours, organizing spreadsheets, scanning emails, cross-referencing times and amounts. Outside, the wind rustled the pine trees, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and earth. The sound of distant birds and the occasional rustle of wildlife reminded Marcus that, even amid corporate treachery, the world outside continued its quiet rhythm. It was a subtle metaphor. Life went on, but justice demanded attention. Finally, Briggs leaned back, exhaustion evident in his posture. "Everything is here," he said. "Every detail, every transfer, every moment that connected Meridian Partners with the Holstead insider. Victor Langford orchestrated the funneling of money to ensure surveillance continued. He didn't just approve it, he planned it." Marcus felt a surge of resolve. Then it's time to confront the truth. Victor needs to understand that his actions, deliberate and concealed, cannot remain hidden. "We will take this evidence to the authorities, and we will provide the story behind the kindness of Isaiah. Your moral decision, Lena's survival, and the girl's prayers." The ripple effect of one boy's courage cannot be silenced. Briggs shifted uncomfortably. "And the photograph?" he asked, eyes darkening with memory. "The one someone took that night. I think I know who might have captured it. Not random. Someone was watching. I didn't know then, but looking back, it fits into the puzzle." Marcus's mind raced. If we can locate the photographer, corroborate the chain of events, it will solidify the timeline. Every decision, every act, every consequence will be undeniable. The story of kindness juxtaposed with corporate malfeasance will stand uncontested. Hours passed. The cabin, small and unassuming, became a war room of evidence, recollections, and strategy. Briggs, once hidden in guilt, now embraced the role of key witness, determined to set the record straight. Marcus realized that without Briggs's testimony, without his moral courage, the investigation could have stalled. This was the moment where past inaction transformed into future accountability. As afternoon light spilled across the cabin floor, Marcus mounted his motorcycle outside once more. Briggs watched from the doorway. A man changed, not just by fear or guilt, but by the realization that doing the right thing, even years after the fact, could have a profound impact. Marcus's destination was clear. Richard Halstead needed to know the full scope of Langford's betrayal, the internal corruption, and the chain of events that made Isaiah's simple act of kindness resonate so deeply. The gravel crunched beneath Marcus's tires as he accelerated down the winding road. Each turn brought him closer to the city, closer to confronting Victor Langford, closer to ensuring that justice, moral courage, and the story of a boy who had done good in the world would finally be heard in its entirety. The wind carried a quiet promise that the smallest act of kindness, observed with integrity, could change the trajectory of lives, inspire conscience, and ultimately demand accountability from even the most powerful. By the time he reached the outskirts of the city, the sun was low, casting long shadows along the highway. Marcus slowed, savoring the moment, the calm before the storm of truth, the tension of revelations yet to be presented. The evidence from Briggs, the photograph, the chains of internal fraud, all were ready to converge into a narrative of courage, justice, and moral awakening. Tonight, he would prepare. Tomorrow, Victor Langford would face the consequences of his decisions. And all the while, the memory of Isaiah's selfless act, the prayers of Amara and Nia, and the courage of a man finally stepping forward from years of guilt would shine as a beacon of hope and integrity. The city skyline stretched across the horizon as Marcus guided his motorcycle into the private driveway of Richard Halstead's estate. The late afternoon sun cast long golden streaks across the manicured lawns, illuminating the house where wealth and grief had intertwined over the past 5 years. Inside, Richard paced quietly in his study, the photograph of Isaiah, his son, resting prominently on the polished desk. The girls' prayers, Amara and Nia, echoed softly in his memory, a constant reminder that something greater than business and betrayal was at stake. Marcus entered, briefcase in hand, his expression taut but measured. "Sir," he began, voice firm yet restrained, "I have everything Briggs provided. Transfers, email threads, witness statements, internal approvals. Victor Langford orchestrated the funding for Meridian Partners' surveillance of Isaiah. Every piece is documented, verifiable, and unambiguous." Richard took a slow breath, absorbing the weight of the news. The man who had once been his trusted executive, confidant, and partner was now revealed as the architect behind a betrayal that exploited his son's innocence and courage. "Show me everything," he said softly, sitting at the desk, hands clasped. His voice was steady, but the undercurrent of grief remained. He needed this, not for vengeance, but for truth. Marcus laid out the evidence, carefully presenting spreadsheets, email chains, and financial transfers. Each document traced the flow of money from Halstead Logistics' internal accounts to Meridian Partners, exposing the covert operation. Langford planned this meticulously, Marcus explained. He authorized Briggs's surveillance, approved transfers, and manipulated internal systems to make it appear legitimate. It's clear he acted alone in terms of internal coordination, but Meridian was the outside beneficiary. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the evidence, the connections between corporate strategy and human tragedy coming into sharp focus. He felt a combination of anger and sorrow, but also clarity. So all this, the monitoring, the photograph, the shelter call, everything was engineered. And yet Isaiah still chose kindness. He still helped Lena and her daughters, without hesitation or expectation. Marcus nodded. Exactly, sir. That's the part that's remarkable. Even under the shadow of a corporate conspiracy, a young boy's decision to act morally created a ripple far beyond what anyone anticipated. Briggs witnessed it, Lena survived, the girls prayed, and that kindness became unassailable, even in the face of calculated manipulation. Richard exhaled slowly, eyes misting. We can't let Langford's actions overshadow Isaiah's legacy. We have to present the facts, ensure accountability, but also honor what Isaiah's choices represent. Agreed, Marcus said. We need to go beyond internal reporting. This is a matter that involves interstate corporate fraud, deliberate manipulation, and the exploitation of a minor's life. The federal prosecutor will need to see everything, and Langford cannot be allowed to hide behind legal technicalities. Richard leaned back in his chair, looking at the photograph of Isaiah on the desk. The memory of that night, the rain, the bus bench, the terrified young mother, was vivid in his mind. He felt the weight of years condensed into this moment, a moment where justice, conscience, and remembrance converge. We proceed carefully, he said, but decisively. Langford must be confronted, and the truth must be made public, not for me, but for the people Isaiah touched, and for every act of kindness that could be diminished by secrecy. Marcus outlined the next steps. First, we verify all details and ensure that every document is corroborated. Second, we contact Patricia Owe, your attorney, to coordinate filing with the federal prosecutor. Third, we prepare for the confrontation. Langford must understand that his actions are fully documented and that his attempts to manipulate or obfuscate will not succeed. Richard's jaw tightened. I want him to see the consequences of betraying not just me, but my family and the integrity of the company. And most importantly, the consequences of underestimating the power of Isaiah's choice to do good. The two men worked late into the evening, meticulously reviewing details, drafting communications, and outlining strategies. Outside, the wind rustled the trees along the estate's perimeter, carrying with it the faint sense of spring flowers and freshly turned earth. The serenity of the estate contrasted sharply with the turbulence of the revelations inside, a reminder that while human decisions could create chaos, they could also inspire calm, reflection, and decisive action. By the time night fell, the evidence was organized, verified, and ready. Richard looked at Marcus, a mix of determination and exhaustion on his face. Tomorrow we confront Victor Langford. We present the facts, the chain of events, and the evidence of both corporate manipulation and Isaiah's untainted kindness. And we ensure that Lena, Amara, and Nia are supported through this. Their voices matter as much as the documentation. Marcus nodded. And Briggs will provide testimony, showing firsthand the human impact of Langford's decisions and the courage of Isaiah. His account bridges the gap between evidence and morality, ensuring that the prosecutor sees both the numbers and the story behind them. Richard stood, walking to the window and gazing out at the city lights shimmering below. This isn't just about punishment. It's about legacy, integrity, and the enduring truth that even in a world driven by greed, kindness can never be erased. Isaiah's actions changed lives. They changed hearts, and they will guide our pursuit of justice. As the night deepened, Richard and Marcus finalized plans for the next day. There was a quiet satisfaction in their preparation, a sense of purpose rooted not in retribution, but in honoring a boy whose selfless act of kindness had revealed both the worst and the best of human nature. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, silent witnesses to the convergence of truth, courage, and moral awakening. The next morning, a crisp spring breeze filled the estate grounds as Richard Halstead walked alongside Marcus Webb toward the black armored SUV waiting at the end of the driveway. The early light shimmered off the dew on the manicured lawns, casting a calm glow over the morning. Despite the serenity outside, inside Richard's mind, the storm of revelation and confrontation raged. Victor Langford, once a trusted executive, now a man exposed for orchestrating surveillance and manipulation against his own colleague's son, awaited them. Today, truth and accountability would collide. Marcus drove carefully, the SUV gliding silently along the quiet streets of the city. Every turn, every stoplight brought them closer to confrontation, and the weight of preparation bore down on both men. Marcus had rehearsed the presentation countless times, verifying every document, every bank transfer, every email, and every witness statement. The story of Isaiah, the young black man whose quiet act of kindness had rippled far beyond anyone's expectations, would be central. "Richard," Marcus said softly, "remember, we're not here to act on anger. We're here to present facts, show evidence, and ensure accountability. Langford cannot manipulate the narrative anymore, but our approach must be controlled." Richard nodded, gripping the edge of his seat. "I know. I've grieved for Isaiah for 5 years. I've relived the night he saved Lena Carter countless times. Today it's not about grief. It's about honoring his legacy and ensuring justice for every act of courage and kindness he performed, no matter how unnoticed." The SUV slowed near a private office building, understated yet imposing. Marcus parked, and they stepped out, the sound of their shoes on polished concrete echoing softly. The building's glass doors reflected the morning sun, highlighting the seriousness of the encounter ahead. Langford was inside, likely unaware of the full breadth of evidence they carried. Every step closer to that room magnified the tension, but also the resolve in Richard's chest. Inside, the office was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of air conditioning. Langford sat behind a large mahogany desk, his posture stiff, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes at the sight of Richard, accompanied by Marcus, the man he knew had been investigating silently, meticulously. "Richard, Langford began, but Richard raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Victor," Richard said, voice calm but authoritative, "we need to discuss the surveillance of my son, the internal transfers to Meridian Partners, and the manipulations that followed. I want the truth, every detail, and I expect full cooperation. The time for evasion is over." Langford's confident mask faltered, a flicker of unease passing across his features. He swallowed, realizing that the meticulous work Marcus had done left no room for deception. Every transfer, every email, every witness statement was compiled and verified, forming an unbreakable chain of accountability. Marcus stepped forward, laying documents neatly on the desk. "Victor, you authorized Briggs's surveillance, directed transfers from Holstead accounts, and attempted to manipulate records after Isaiah's death. The documentation confirms your involvement and intent. You cannot hide behind ignorance. The evidence is exhaustive." Langford shifted in his seat, unease giving way to a defensive posture. I was following company strategy. I didn't foresee the outcome. I thought I was protecting Holstead Logistics." Richard's eyes, steady and unyielding, met Langford's. "You call it protection, but you used a child's innocence as leverage. Isaiah's kindness was genuine, and you sought to exploit it for corporate gain. You underestimated the impact of goodness, and now you face the consequences of your choices." Langford's shoulders slumped, a man confronted not by threat, but by irrefutable truth. Every action he had taken, every attempt to cover tracks, now lay exposed in the documents before him. Marcus continued, calmly but firmly, "Your actions had human consequences. Isaiah saved Lena Carter, a pregnant woman, who in turn raised her daughters with love, guided by his example. These lives and countless others were affected, and they will not be ignored." The weight of Marcus's words, combined with the clarity of the evidence, brought Langford to a rare silence. He realized that the story he tried to manipulate was no longer his to control. Richard's presence, composed yet resolute, reminded him that this was not a vendetta. It was accountability, built on the courage of a boy who had chosen kindness in the face of danger. Richard leaned slightly forward, his hands resting on the edge of the desk. "Victor, the next step is cooperation with authorities. Every document, every witness, and every confession will be shared with the federal prosecutor. It's time to accept responsibility for your decisions, and perhaps to begin understanding that integrity matters more than profit." Langford nodded, the first signs of remorse in his eyes. "I understand. I'll cooperate. I can't undo what I've done, but I'll answer every question, disclose everything, and take responsibility. Marcus glanced at Richard. Sir, that concludes the initial confrontation. The federal case will follow and will ensure it includes all elements of corporate fraud and misuse of influence. Lena, Amara, and Nia's story, Isaiah's story, will guide this process. Richard exhaled, a mixture of relief and determination settling over him. The confrontation had succeeded, not through aggression or intimidation, but through meticulous preparation, moral clarity, and the unwavering example of Isaiah's selfless choices. Outside, the morning sun illuminated the streets, casting long shadows and highlighting the possibilities for justice, healing, and continued acts of kindness. After the initial confrontation, Richard and Marcus left Victor Langford's office, the morning light brightening as if reflecting the clarity that now existed in their path. The streets were quiet, with only the distant hum of traffic and occasional chirping of birds breaking the calm. Richard felt a heavy but purposeful energy settle over him, a mix of relief, grief, and anticipation. The hard part wasn't over, but the truth had begun to surface, and that truth centered around Isaiah's courage, Lena Carter, and the twins, Amara and Nia. Back at the estate, Richard sat in his study, the familiar leather chair enveloping him in a sense of permanence amid the chaos of the last few weeks. He spread out the documents Marcus had prepared, every email, every financial record, every detail of Briggs's surveillance, and every moment of Victor's complicity. Yet even as he reviewed the facts, his mind returned to the children, their faith, their prayers, and their unshakable belief in Isaiah's goodness provided a moral compass stronger than any legal precedent. The phone rang, breaking his reflection. Marcus answered and passed the line to Richard. Good morning, Mr. Halstead, the voice on the other end said. We've reviewed your submission, and we understand the gravity of the evidence you've compiled. Our office is ready to proceed with an immediate investigation. Extradition and formal charges are likely against Victor Langford and Michael Grant, given the corporate fraud and deliberate manipulations involved. Richard's chest tightened. Justice was moving forward, yet he remained mindful of the personal stories behind the paperwork. Thank you, he replied, his voice steady. This case is not just about corporate wrongdoing. It's about a young man who chose to act with courage and kindness, a woman who needed help, and two little girls whose prayers have guided us to this point. Everything must reflect the human impact of these actions. Marcus leaned closer. Sir, we've confirmed that Michael Grant, the legal advisor, was involved in sanitizing records after Isaiah's death. While he claims ignorance of the full context, he's complicit in the chain of events. The prosecutor will need the complete account, including the twin statements, Lena's testimony, and Briggs' confessions. Richard nodded, thinking back to Lena's words when she described Isaiah buying her a sandwich and water with only $12, then waiting with her in the rain until she was safe. Those small gestures, seemingly inconsequential at the time, had created ripples that extended far beyond the night they occurred. Each act of compassion carried weight, shaping not just Lena's future, but the futures of Amara and Nia, and even the moral awakening of Walter Briggs. Later that afternoon, Richard called Lena. She answered hesitantly, her voice soft but warm. Richard, is everything okay? Yes, Lena, he said gently. I wanted to let you know that the federal authorities are now involved. Victor Langford and Michael Grant will face the consequences of their actions. More importantly, your story, Isaiah's story, and the twins' prayers will guide this process. Justice will not overlook the human impact. Lena exhaled, a mixture of relief and emotion threading her words. Richard, I don't even have words. Isaiah, he didn't have to help me. He didn't know what would happen, and yet he did. Now it feels like the world is finally seeing what he did for us. Richard smiled softly, even though a shadow of grief lingered. It's the truth, Lena. He acted with courage when the world might have looked away. That choice, that act of kindness, is what has brought clarity, accountability, and hope to all of us. As the call ended, Richard reflected on the significance of this moment. The twins' prayers, whispered so fervently at Isaiah's grave, had ignited a chain of events exposing corporate deceit and reminding every adult involved that morality cannot be silenced. Even Victor Langford, once confident in his manipulations, had begun to face the consequences of underestimating the weight of goodness. Later, Marcus arrived with a thick binder containing witness statements, financial audits, and Briggs' full account. "Sir, this is everything. The federal office will need copies of all this, along with statements from Lena and the twins. If they review it carefully, the case is airtight." Richard flipped through the pages slowly, letting each name, each action, and each confession resonate in his mind. "It's more than airtight," he murmured. "It's a record of courage and compassion. It's Isaiah's legacy in writing, proof that one person's choice can ripple outward, affecting lives and awakening conscience." As evening approached, Richard stepped onto the estate balcony. The golden glow of the setting sun reflected off the distant city skyline, painting the horizon in shades of orange and purple. The twins' faces flashed in his mind, their innocence, their unwavering prayers, and the quiet strength they exhibited far beyond their years. He envisioned them one day telling others about Isaiah, their voices carrying the story of a young black man whose act of kindness had changed their lives and the lives of those around him. Richard knew that tomorrow, when the federal investigation formally began, he would be presenting not just evidence, but a testament to character, integrity, and the profound impact of moral courage. Every email, every bank record, every witness statement was more than just paper. It was the narrative of a life lived with compassion, a story that demanded recognition, respect, and justice. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the evening sky. Richard felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered with remembrance, knowing that every step forward was guided by Isaiah's example. The case, the investigation, and the accountability of Victor Langford and Michael Grant would soon follow. But for now, he allowed himself a moment to reflect on courage, on human connection, and on the unshakable faith of two little girls whose prayers had started a journey toward truth and justice. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of Richard Halstead's study, casting warm patterns on the polished wooden floor. Outside, the estate was calm, the subtle hum of the city in the distance a gentle reminder that life continued beyond these walls. Yet inside, a storm of purpose and meticulous planning stirred. Richard had spent countless hours reviewing every detail of Isaiah's final night, Lena Carter's plight, and the surveillance that had recorded the young man's extraordinary act of kindness. Now it was time to take the next step, officially presenting the evidence to the federal authorities. Marcus Webb, faithful and precise, stood beside Richard with a folder brimming with meticulously compiled documents. "Sir, everything is ready," he said. "We've organized the evidence, statements, and financial records chronologically. Each page tells a story, each document highlights responsibility. The federal office will have no ambiguity." Richard nodded, feeling both anticipation and reverence. "This isn't just about proving wrongdoing," he said softly. "It's about honoring Isaiah. Every report, every statement must reflect the human impact, his courage, his empathy, the lives he changed, especially Lena and the twins. This has to be more than paperwork. It has to be a testament to his character." He picked up the phone with careful precision, dialing the direct line to the federal prosecutor's office. The soft click of buttons seemed to echo in the room, punctuating the gravity of the moment. After a brief pause, a composed voice answered, "Mr. Halstead?" "Yes," Richard replied. "I'm calling regarding a matter that involves interstate corporate fraud, deliberate manipulation of a young man's life for leverage, and the profound human consequences that followed. My son, Isaiah Halstead, passed away 5 years ago, but his final act of kindness has unveiled a network of wrongdoing that must be addressed." There was a pause on the other end. "We're listening," the prosecutor said, a measured tone indicating full attention. "Please explain the situation in detail." Richard began, recounting the night Isaiah had encountered Lena Carter, pregnant and homeless, sitting frightened at a bus stop. He described the young man's choice to help her, spending his limited money on food and water, and staying with her until a shelter van arrived. He spoke of the twins, Amara and Nia, who had prayed for Isaiah even without knowing him, their prayers guiding Richard toward the truth hidden behind corporate deceit. He detailed the surveillance, The involvement of Walter Briggs, once a corporate driver, now revealed as a witness whose conscience had shifted after observing Isaiah's kindness, and the internal accounts used to fund the intrusion into Isaiah's life. Every document Marcus had prepared was referenced. Emails, financial transfers, and witness statements that traced the manipulation directly to Victor Langford and his co-conspirators. The prosecutor listened carefully, interjecting only for clarification. You're saying that the surveillance was deliberately commissioned and that internal company accounts were used to fund it? She asked. Yes, Richard confirmed. And it's critical to understand that Isaiah's death was unrelated to the corporate actions. But his kindness, his decision to help Lena, set in motion a chain of evidence that now reveals a network of deception and corruption. It cannot be ignored and it must be addressed. The lives affected, the young girls, their mother, and the moral awakening of Walter Briggs, all these human elements are part of this case. The line fell silent for a moment. Then the prosecutor replied, "We will initiate an immediate review. Given the interstate nature of the corporate fraud, the involvement of multiple parties, and the depth of evidence you've provided, this will be treated as a high-priority case. We may proceed with formal charges, and extradition will be considered for anyone outside our jurisdiction. We will also require testimony from you, Ms. Carter, the twins if necessary, and Mr. Briggs." Richard exhaled, a mixture of relief and determination flooding through him. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady. "We'll prepare all necessary statements and coordinate schedules. My aim is not just legal resolution, but ensuring that Isaiah's story, his courage, and his compassion are preserved throughout this process." After the call ended, Marcus laid out the next steps. Witness statements to be notarized, records to be formally submitted, and a timeline for coordinating with Lena and the twins for interviews. Each action had to be precise, because every word could reinforce the profound human narrative that accompanied the legal case. Richard walked to the balcony, looking out over the estate gardens. The morning breeze carried the faint scent of blooming flowers, mingled with the distant hum of motorcycles on the road below. It was a familiar sound that had often brought him solace, yet today it felt symbolic, a reminder of discipline, camaraderie, and the collective power of action. Just as the biker groups he admired acted with cohesion and purpose, so too would this case proceed, methodical, deliberate, and driven by the higher cause of justice and morality. Later, Lena arrived at the estate, Amara and Nia clutching her hands. Their faces were a mixture of nervous anticipation and quiet pride. Richard greeted them warmly, explaining the progress with the federal office, the scheduled statements, and the importance of their voices. "Your prayers, your courage, and your honesty are central," he told them. "The prosecutors will not just see documents. They will see the lives Isaiah touched, the goodness he showed, and the moral lessons that extend beyond his years." Amara's small hand reached for Richard's, her grip firm with resolve. "We want to help," she said simply. Nia echoed, "We want everyone to know what Isaiah did for Mommy." Richard smiled, the warmth of their conviction spreading through him. "You will," he promised, "and the world will understand. Today marks the next chapter, where compassion meets accountability and courage is honored in every action we take." As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the estate, Richard and Marcus began preparing the binders for delivery, double-checking every statement, every record, and every detail. Outside, the sound of motorcycles in the distance reminded Richard of discipline, loyalty, and the moral responsibility that comes with power. Isaiah's story had started with a simple act of kindness. Now it would ripple through the justice system, through families, and through communities, a lasting testament to what it means to act rightly, even in the shadow of loss. The afternoon sun dipped low over the city skyline, painting long shadows across the quiet streets near Richard Halstead's estate. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with purpose and anticipation. The federal office had officially reviewed the evidence, and the wheels of justice had begun turning. Richard, Marcus Webb, and Patricia Oa meticulously coordinated every detail. Witness testimonies, financial records, and the intricate timeline of events that connected Isaiah's final act of kindness to the broader corporate deception. The first step was the extradition of Victor Langford, who had been residing in Portugal, and the surrender of Michael Grant, previously ensconced in the upper echelons of Holstead Logistics' legal department. Both men, once confident in their wealth and influence, were now confronting a reality they could no longer manipulate. The careful layering of evidence, emails, internal transfers, witness accounts, and Walter Briggs' testimony left no room for evasion. Richard felt a mixture of vindication and somber reflection. Justice was coming, but the human story behind it remained paramount. Lena Carter arrived at the estate with Amara and Nia, their eyes reflecting a combination of curiosity, nervousness, and quiet pride. Richard welcomed them warmly, explaining that the next stages involved formal statements, interviews, and eventual court proceedings. "Your voices matter," he told them softly. "What Isaiah did was extraordinary, and it is essential that the truth of his compassion is understood by everyone involved. This is not just legal process, it is the preservation of his character and the lives he impacted." Amara and Nia nodded, understanding more than their years suggested. "We'll help tell his story," Amara said, her voice steady and sincere. Nia echoed, "We'll pray for everyone to see what Isaiah did." The days that followed were a meticulous blend of preparation and quiet reflection. Richard and Marcus ensured that every submission to the federal office was flawless, each page a testament to Isaiah's integrity and humanity. Patricia O.A. guided them through the procedural complexities, her calm authority instilling confidence in the team. Yet throughout it all, Richard remained acutely aware of the deeper significance. Isaiah's courage, his selflessness in helping Lena, that stormy night, was now a beacon for justice and moral accountability. As Victor Langford was escorted from Portugal, his expression a mixture of shock and apprehension. The contrast between past arrogance and present reality was stark. Michael Grant, surrendering voluntarily, bore a quieter tension, his acknowledgement of ignorance and complicity painting a human portrait of error and awakening. Both men would face charges, but Richard remained focused not on retribution alone, but on truth and the enduring impact of Isaiah's kindness. Throughout the process, Lena remained central. Her guidance, reflections, and intimate knowledge of the events that had unfolded gave the foundation of testimony, authenticity, and emotional resonance. The twins, Amar and Nia, continued their quiet prayers, their voices rising softly each evening. "Thank you for saving Mommy. We will pray for Isaiah forever." Those words, innocent yet profoundly meaningful, reminded Richard of the moral core that had guided his son and the ripple effect that kindness could create across lives and generations. Between interviews and submissions, Richard visited the estate gardens, reflecting on Isaiah's quiet heroism. He thought of the night at the bus stop, the pouring rain, and the exhausted young mother clutching her stomach, unaware of how much hope she was about to receive. The simplicity of the act, a shared sandwich, water, and reassurance, contrasted sharply with the complex web of corporate surveillance and manipulation that had followed. Yet even amid manipulation, deception, and greed, the purity of Isaiah's choice remained untouched. The story now began reaching wider audiences. The twins' presence, Lena's courage, and Isaiah's memory became central to the narrative, ensuring that public perception would honor the young man's humanity. Richard knew that the narrative needed careful management. It was not merely a tale of corporate wrongdoing, but a story that highlighted moral awakening, compassion, and the enduring significance of selfless choices. By the time Victor Langford and Michael Grant faced their first formal proceedings, the narrative was clear and undeniable. The documents, corroborating statements, and witness testimonies created a coherent, emotionally compelling case. Each revelation added weight to the story of Isaiah's final act, emphasizing not only the injustice perpetrated by corporate rivals, but the extraordinary courage displayed by a young man who had chosen kindness in the midst of danger. After the initial hearings, Richard returned home with Lena and the twins to the quiet sanctuary of the estate. The girls, still small but brimming with understanding, held his hands as he knelt beside them in the garden. "You've both been part of something extraordinary," he said softly. "Your prayers, your faith, and your courage are just as important as any document or testimony. Isaiah's story lives because of you." The twins smiled, the sun casting golden streaks across their faces. "We'll always remember him," Nia whispered, "and we'll always pray." Amara nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. "Forever." That evening, Richard placed a hand on Isaiah's memorial plaque, engraved with a simple message, "In memory of Isaiah Halstead, whose courage and kindness changed the world." He felt the weight of grief, pride, and hope converge, understanding fully that the coming legal victories, the foundation, and the moral awakening of all involved were only the beginning of Isaiah's ripple effect. As night fell, the estate was quiet except for the gentle hum of motorcycles in the distance, a reminder of discipline, loyalty, and the collective strength Richard admired in those who acted with purpose. Isaiah's story, once tragically cut short, now unfolded in layers of legal accountability, moral clarity, and a human legacy that would continue to touch countless lives. In that stillness, Richard whispered to himself, "Isaiah, your kindness has created a new family, a foundation, and a story that will inspire generations. We'll see it through." Outside, Amara and Nia's soft prayers rose to the night sky once more, echoing the sentiment of a child's unwavering belief in goodness. "Thank you for saving Mommy. We will pray for Isaiah forever." The first light of dawn stretched over the horizon, brushing Richard Halstead's estate with soft gold and amber tones. The gardens, meticulously maintained yet brimming with life, seemed to reflect a new beginning, not just for the Halstead family, but for the countless lives Isaiah's kindness had touched. Richard stood quietly at the edge of the memorial garden, watching the petals glisten with morning dew. Each flower seemed to whisper the memory of his son, a gentle reminder that even brief lives can cast immense ripples. Inside, preparations for the Daniel Halstead Foundation were underway. The legal paperwork had been finalized, the board of advisors selected, and the pilot programs carefully designed. Families in crisis, young mothers and children who might otherwise feel invisible, would now have access to food, shelter, counseling, and mentorship. But beyond the tangible support, the foundation carried something more profound: the ethos of compassion, courage, and moral clarity that Isaiah had embodied that rainy night. Lena Carter arrived with Amara and Nia, the twins' small hands gripping hers tightly as they walked across the estate. Richard greeted them warmly, feeling the familiar mixture of gratitude and awe that came whenever he was near these resilient children. "Good morning," he said softly. "Today we begin the next chapter of Isaiah's legacy, not just in memory, but in action." The twins' eyes widened as they were led through the foundation offices. Volunteers prepared emergency kits, counselors organized schedules, and mentors reviewed program materials, all working with a shared understanding that this was more than a charity. It was a living embodiment of a boy's compassion. Amara whispered to Nia, "This is like Isaiah's heart, made real." Nia nodded solemnly, echoing her sister. "We'll help it grow." Richard guided Lena and the twins to a small conference room where the first team meeting was about to begin. As they entered, he addressed the gathered volunteers and advisors with a calm, authoritative presence. "This foundation is born from one young man's extraordinary act of kindness," he began. "Isaiah saved his mother's life, and in doing so, reminded the world that even small gestures have the power to transform lives. Our responsibility is to ensure that every family we touch experiences that same hope, dignity, and compassion." He spoke of the foundation's immediate programs: food and supply distribution for families in need, short-term housing assistance, healthcare support, and mentorship connecting children with adults committed to guiding them through life's challenges. Each initiative reflected a principle Isaiah had lived by: empathy without expectation, courage in the face of adversity, and generosity beyond measure. Lena, now fully engaged as an advisor, offered her insight into structuring intake processes. She explained the emotional nuances that statistics could never capture: the subtle fear in a mother's eyes, the quiet hesitation of a child, and the courage required to accept help. Her perspective grounded the foundation in real-world experience, ensuring that it was not only effective, but also deeply compassionate. After the meeting, Richard took a moment to step outside with Amara and Nia. The twins' prayers had been a constant guide throughout the legal proceedings and the Foundation's establishment, their voices a quiet, unwavering moral compass. Richard knelt beside them, feeling the warmth of their small hands in his own. "You've been part of something extraordinary," he said. "Your faith, your prayers, and your courage have helped turn tragedy into hope for thousands." Isaiah's story is no longer just a memory. It is alive in every life we touch. The twins looked up at him, their faces reflecting pride and reverence. Nia whispered, "We will always remember him." Amara added, "And we'll tell everyone about his heart." As the morning progressed, the first shipments of aid were dispatched to families in need. Volunteers visited shelters, delivered supplies, and offered guidance, all carrying the spirit of Isaiah's kindness. Richard observed quietly, a mixture of solemn pride and gentle awe filling him. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced the ripple effect of a single act, a simple, compassionate choice made years earlier on a stormy night. That afternoon, the Halsteads returned to Isaiah's memorial garden. Richard, Lena, Amara, and Nia gathered together, placing fresh flowers atop the gravestone. The twins whispered their customary prayer. "Thank you for saving Mommy. We will pray for Isaiah forever." Richard closed his eyes, placing his hand gently on the stone. "You changed the world, son," he murmured. "Through kindness, courage, and love, your life, though brief, has created a family, a foundation, and a future filled with hope. We will honor you every day." The sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the memorial. Richard watched Amara and Nia carefully place the flowers, feeling a profound sense of closure and anticipation. Isaiah's legacy had transformed grief into action, sorrow into service, and a singular, selfless choice into a beacon of inspiration. Later, as evening settled over the estate, Richard returned to the Foundation offices to oversee the completion of the first day's initiatives. Volunteers reported successful aid deliveries, grateful families expressed heartfelt thanks, and the framework for mentorship programs began to take tangible shape. Each conversation, each gesture, carried the essence of Isaiah's compassion forward. Finally, Richard paused at the edge of the memorial garden one last time that evening, the stars beginning to punctuate the darkening sky. He reflected on the journey, the tragedy, the unexpected connection to Lena and the twins, the moral awakening of those involved, and the establishment of a foundation that would continue Isaiah's work for generations. In the quiet night, he whispered softly, "Isaiah, your kindness will never fade. It will live on in every life we touch, in every heart we inspire, and in every act of goodness we nurture. You have changed the world." Amar and Naya, watching the night sky beside him, repeated their eternal promise. "We will pray for Isaiah forever." In that moment, Richard understood fully. The ripple of one young man's compassion had become a river of hope, flowing outward to touch lives he would never see. To inspire courage and kindness in a world that so desperately needed it, the legacy was secure and its impact would endure forever.